If Echo hadn't growled that night, the whole case would have stayed buried. The flames had long been extinguished. The smell of charred wood lingered like an unwanted memory. It was just after midnight when Sheriff Ben Whitaker parked his dusty patrol truck on the edge of the Carver property. To anyone else, it was just a run-down farmhouse that had caught fire in the middle of nowhere. But Echo, his retired K-9 partner, knew better. The German Shepherd had started whining the second they turned onto the old dirt road. When Ben opened the door, Echo didn't wait for a command. He leapt out and darted toward the ruins, ears pinned forward, nose twitching. 10 years since the Carver family vanished without a trace. 10 years since people stopped asking questions. And yet, here they were, standing in front of the same chimney where the Christmas stockings used to hang. The house was a skeleton now, half collapsed and reeking of secrets. And Echo was locked in on something. He growled low, pacing around the stone base of the chimney. "What is it, boy?" Ben asked, stepping carefully over blackened debris. "Squirrel? Coyote, maybe?" But Echo wasn't chasing animals. He was chasing ghosts. They'd said it was electrical. The fire. Some loose wiring ignited in the attic of a house nobody had lived in for a decade. Case closed. Move along. But Ben couldn't shake it. The Carvers had been his neighbors. Rachel Carver used to bake pecan pie for his late wife. Her husband, Roger, taught his son how to change a tire. Then one night in 2012, they simply vanished. No broken windows, no signs of forced entry, just a locked door and silence. Until tonight. Echo barked once, sharp, focused. He was pawing at the chimney now, digging into the soot-covered bricks. Ben sighed. All right, let me take a look." He crouched beside the old fireplace and ran his fingers along the stone. That's when he felt it. One brick slightly loose, wiggling beneath the ash. He tugged gently. It scraped out of place with a gritty pop, releasing a cloud of soot that stung his nose. Behind it was a hollow, and inside something yellow. Ben reached in and pulled out a plastic-wrapped bundle. The plastic was melted at the edges, but the contents were oddly intact. A small pajama top, yellow, with cartoon puppies. A ripped photo of a smiling little girl on a tricycle. A child's drawing of a treehouse with the word home scrawled in crayon. Ben's heart sank. "That's Ellie's," he whispered. He remembered it now. Ellie Carver. 6 years old, gap-toothed grin, always running around in that ridiculous pajama set. It was the same outfit she wore the last time anyone saw her. But how in God's name was it still here, untouched, unfaded, after 10 years? Echo sat beside him, panting softly, eyes fixed on the opening in the chimney. "What the hell's going on, boy?" For a long moment, Ben didn't move. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of old smoke and something sweeter, familiar, like the perfume Rachel used to wear. He turned to Echo. "You knew, didn't you?" The dog whined. The next morning, Ben called the station and told them it was probably just a small fire, nothing suspicious. He didn't mention the pajama top, or the photo, or the sick feeling growing in his gut. Instead, he drove straight to his home on the edge of town, Echo in the passenger seat, alert as ever. Ben opened the old file he'd been hiding in his garage. The Carver disappearance. A box full of dead ends. Police reports, drone footage, witness statements, and a receipt for 5 gallons of white paint from a hardware store just days before they vanished. Nothing useful, until Echo nudged a sealed envelope in the box, one that had never been opened. Ben blinked. He didn't remember that being in there. Inside was a burner phone, dead battery. He stared at it, puzzled. Echo barked once, tail stiff. "You think this means something?" Ben asked. Echo walked to the front door and sat, expectant. That was how they always used to do it. Ben followed Echo's lead, not the other way around. It was time to trust him again. Love dogs and stories, where they're the heroes, Subscribe now to Heroes for Animals, and don't miss Echo's journey as he unearths the truth 1 cent at a time. The local hardware store hadn't changed much. The same creaky floors, the same bored teenager behind the counter. Ben slapped down the paint receipt from 10 years ago. "You still got sales records from 2012? The kid shrugged. "Probably in the back. Let me ask Carl." 20 minutes later, Ben had a name. Brandon Holt. The guy who picked up the paint for Roger Carver wasn't family. Wasn't even from town. Out-of-state ID, paid in cash. Never came back. Ben ran the name through his system. Nothing. No priors. No address. No one. But something about it felt off. Why would a stranger be buying paint for Roger the week he vanished? He brought the info home and pinned it to his old cork board, the board he hadn't touched since his wife passed. Echo sat nearby, staring at the photo of the Carver family, especially at Ellie. He tilted his head, then trotted out the dog door. Ben followed him to the backyard. Echo was digging. Hard. When Ben got close, he saw something shiny in the dirt. A rusted key, stamped with Safe Mart Storage Unit 47A. Ben's pulse jumped. He didn't even know Roger had a storage unit. Echo growled again, low, warning. Someone was watching. Ben looked up just in time to see a dark SUV pulling away from the street, tires kicking up gravel. He memorized the plates. Echo barked twice. It had begun. Ben Whitaker hadn't been inside a storage unit in over 20 years. Last time, it had been to pack up his wife's things after the cancer took her. But as he stood outside Safe Mart storage, holding the rusted key Echo had unearthed, the past felt a lot less distant, and a hell of a lot more dangerous. The metal gate buzzed open after he entered the code scratched on the back of the key tag. Unit 47A was near the end of the second row, shaded by a cottonwood tree that creaked in the dry Montana wind. Echo walked beside him, calm but alert, ears perked, nose twitching. "All right, partner," Ben muttered. "Let's see what Roger Carver was hiding." The padlock clicked open with surprising ease. Either it had been oiled recently, or someone had been here before him. The door groaned upward. The smell hit first. Dust, oil, and something sweetly sour. Old wood, forgotten paper, mildew. Inside was a single overhead bulb on a pull string and a few wooden crates. Nothing flashy, no stolen jewels or criminal blueprints. But Echo stiffened. He moved straight to the back, sniffing a wooden crate with the words Mitchell Paint Co. stenciled on the side. Ben opened it with a crowbar from his trunk. Inside were work gloves, concrete-stained boots, a stack of photographs, and a folded canvas bag marked Client Ledgers. Ben knelt down. The first photo was of Roger Carver, smiling nervously beside a man in a suit with a military haircut and eyes like sheet metal. In the background, a half-finished construction site. The date in the corner, August 24th, 2012. 3 weeks before the family disappeared. Ben flipped it over, scribbled in ink, "Alvarez Project, 3rd phase, shut it down before it shuts us down." Echo let out a growl, soft but steady, and backed away from the box, hackles raised. "Echo," Ben whispered. The dog's eyes locked on something. A small, black, unmarked safe in the far corner. It was wedged beneath an old tarp and rusted folding chair. Echo pawed at it, barked once, and then looked back at Ben like he was saying, "This one. This is the reason we came." Ben pulled it free, dust rising like fog. No code, just a simple keyhole. He tried the same key from the unit. It worked. Inside was a small burner phone, a few documents sealed in plastic, and a USB drive taped to the back of a photo of Ellie Carver. Ben's stomach clenched. Ellie, smiling, sitting on a swing, her feet kicking toward the camera. But it wasn't a memory. The date stamp was just 2 weeks ago. Back at the sheriff's office, Ben plugged the USB into his laptop while Echo laid near his feet. The dog hadn't taken his eyes off the desk since they got back. The drive contained a series of documents labeled Insurance, Carver, priority. Ben opened the first file, a PDF copy of bank statements, all tied to Carver Construction. Every deposit had a three-letter code beside it: DEA, ATF, DOT. Some entries as high as 180,000. The second file had scanned documents of emails, purchase orders, client lists, all marked with the same name: Alvarez Dev Group, LLC. He didn't recognize the name, but Echo did. As soon as Ben read it aloud, Echo whined, ears back, eyes on the photo of Ellie. "You heard that name before?" Echo stood, walked to the corner of the room where Ben kept his old case files, and pawed the filing cabinet. Ben opened the bottom drawer, unsolved disappearances. He hadn't touched this drawer in 5 years. Echo sniffed through folders until his nose hit one labeled Matthews Family, 2009. Ben flipped it open. Another family. Also vanished without a trace. Also connected to a construction project in the next county over. And in the corner of one photo, barely visible on a job site banner: Alvarez Dev Group, LLC. Ben sat back in his chair. Jesus Christ! That night, he couldn't sleep. Echo paced the hallway. Ben finally gave up and walked out to his truck, USB in his pocket. He drove to Missoula, 3 hours west, where he had a contact at the regional FBI field office. Agent Rachel Brooks owed him a favor from an arson case 5 years back. When she saw the files, her eyes narrowed. "Where the hell did you get this?" "You really want to know?" "Not if it means I have to put it in a report." She plugged in the USB. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. "You said Alvarez Dev Group?" "Yeah. Name doesn't show up on anything official. No tax records, no licenses, but—" She paused, eyes narrowing. "We do have an open investigation tied to that name in Dallas, and another flagged by Homeland out of New Mexico." "What kind of investigation?" "Trafficking." Ben's blood turned to ice. "You think the Carvers—" "Sheriff," she cut in, "if what's on this drive is real, and so far it looks damn real, this Alvarez outfit isn't just a shady developer. They're laundering money, falsifying permits, moving people like freight." "You said the Carvers disappeared 10 years ago?" "Yes." "And you think their daughter is still alive?" Ben pulled out the photo from the safe. "Taken 2 weeks ago." Rachel leaned back. "You need to disappear for a while, Ben. Whoever left this for you, they knew you'd find it. But they also knew others might be watching." Ben swallowed hard. "You think I'm being watched?" "I'd bet my pension on it." The next morning, Ben took Echo and drove back to the Carver house, or what was left of it. He needed to see it again, to retrace his steps. Echo leapt out the moment they stopped. He didn't run to the chimney this time. He ran to the backyard, to the old oak tree. "Echo!" Ben followed, heart racing. Echo barked twice and stared up into the branches. There, half camouflaged by vines and dead leaves, was something Ben had forgotten about. The treehouse. He hadn't seen it in years. Roger had built it with his own hands for Ellie's 7th birthday. A little wooden sanctuary. The ladder was still intact. Ben climbed carefully, flashlight in hand. The inside smelled of rot and pine, but something caught his eye in the corner. A stuffed elephant, half-molded, but unmistakably the one Ellie carried everywhere. Mr. Pickles. Ben picked it up. The stitching was loose at the seam. He opened it gently. Inside, a note. "If you're reading this, it means Echo found you. That means you're someone I can trust. My name is Roger Carver. They're alive, but they're not free. And they're not safe." Ben stared at the words, heart pounding in his chest. He looked down at Echo, tail wagging below, staring up like he already knew. "We've got a bigger problem than we thought," Ben whispered. The last time Ben Whitaker stood inside the Carver house, it had been filled with laughter. Back then, Ellie had been coloring at the kitchen table, while Rachel served coffee in chipped porcelain mugs. Roger always smelled like sawdust and aftershave, and he was never far from a project or a problem. It had been a good home, stable, loved. Now it was a burned-out shell, quiet in the worst way. Ben gripped the note he'd found inside the stuffed elephant. It was soft from age, the ink fading, but the message was unmistakable. They're alive, but they're not free. And they're not safe. He stood beside the fireplace where Echo had first uncovered the pajama top. The place felt different now, heavier somehow, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for the truth to finally come out. Echo circled slowly through the living room, sniffing every charred wall, ears twitching. He stopped suddenly and stared at the far wall beneath the staircase. Ben followed. There was a hollow space behind the drywall, maybe 2 feet wide, enough to hide something. Echo pawed at the baseboard, and Ben dropped to one knee. "All right, buddy," he whispered. "Let's see what else they didn't want us to find." Behind the wall, tucked inside a sealed plastic sleeve, were several photographs. Most were old. Family shots, vacations, Christmas mornings. But one stood out, a school photo of Ellie, older now, maybe 16 or 17, wearing a blue polo and smiling politely, her braces gone. Ben turned it over. In the corner, Maria C. Valley Springs Charter School, a private school in New Mexico. Ben blinked. He had been expecting another lead, a financial breadcrumb. But this was something else. A location. And a name. Echo whined softly. Ben looked down at him. "You thinking what I'm thinking?" Echo trotted to the door and sat, ready to move. They left Cedar Falls that night, driving into the flat, endless plains, under a rising Montana moon. Ben had packed a duffel bag, his badge, and a Glock he hadn't fired in 5 years. Echo rode shotgun, his head resting against the window, eyes open the whole ride. By morning, they hit Santa Fe. Ben pulled off into a gas station and flipped through the school's website. Valley Springs Charter School. Small, arts-focused, tuition-based. The staff photo page loaded slowly. He scrolled. There she was, Maria Cardenas, 11th grade graphic design student. Her hair was longer now. She wore glasses, but Ben would have known that face anywhere. She looked like her mother. Same hazel eyes, same soft jawline. She was alive. Ellie Carver had become Maria Cardenas. But why? And how? Ben's stomach churned. He reached over and scratched Echo behind the ears. "She's right here, Echo. But she doesn't know she's Ellie. Hell, she might not even remember us at all." Echo whined and licked his hand. Ben knew better than to walk onto a private school campus asking questions. That kind of thing got the cops called, even when you were one. Instead, he parked across the street and waited. At 3:17 p.m., the school bell rang. Students poured out of the front doors, laughing, texting, swiping rideshare apps. And there she was, Ellie, or Maria, as she was known here. Backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds in, phone in hand. She walked like she belonged, confident, independent. Ben stayed in the truck, heart pounding. Echo whined. "Not yet," Ben whispered. He followed at a distance, keeping 2 cars between them. Maria walked 4 blocks, then turned onto a quiet street lined with adobe-style townhomes. She entered Unit 103. Ben waited 15 minutes before stepping out. He snapped a photo of the mailbox. Cardenas, R.M., Rachel and Maria. His hand trembled as he snapped a second photo of the welcome mat that read, "Home is where your story begins." Ben climbed back in the truck, throat tight. "She's not missing," he whispered. "She's replaced." He didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. He stared at the photos, the school ID, the mailbox. At 2:45 a.m., his burner phone buzzed. Blocked number. He picked up. Whitaker. A man's voice. Calm, precise, smooth, like glass. "You've been asking questions." Ben sat up. "Who is this?" "You were warned." "I don't respond to threats." "This isn't a threat. It's a courtesy." Click! Ben tossed the phone onto the dash and stared into the darkness. Next to him, Echo growled low and long. The next morning, he tried to knock on the door of Unit 103. No answer. He left a note in the mailbox. "Rachel, it's Ben Whitaker. Ellie is alive, and I know. Please." I just want to talk." 2 hours later, his phone buzzed again. This time, a text. "Stop looking. You're not her family anymore." He stared at the screen, barely breathing. Next to him, Echo pressed his head into Ben's side. It was Echo who picked up the next trail. That evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Echo jumped from the truck and darted behind a row of garages. He stopped beside a trash bin and sniffed furiously. Inside the bin was a torn envelope addressed to Rachel Cardenas and a shredded photograph. Ben pulled it out, piece by piece. It was the Carver family, whole, unbroken, smiling in their backyard from a time long before things went dark. On the back, in faded ink, "Never forget who you were." Ben clutched the photo and sank onto the curb. Rachel hadn't forgotten. She had buried it, but she remembered. Back in his motel room, Ben scanned the school records. Valley Springs listed an emergency contact for Maria, Father Alejandro Ruiz. The name hit like a punch. Alejandro Ruiz, the same name from Roger's note in the treehouse. The man in the photo. The man behind Alvarez Dev Group. The man who had swallowed families whole and spit out replacements. Ben opened the burner phone again and typed one line. "We need to talk. No cops. Just me. Sheriff Whitaker." And hit send. 10 minutes later, it buzzed back. "Meet me where the story began." Ben's hands went cold. Echo growled, "The Carver house." They were going back. Ben Whitaker parked 2 blocks from the old Carver house and turned off the headlights. It was 2:12 a.m. Cedar Falls was asleep. Even the wind felt quieter, like the town was holding its breath again. Echo sat alert in the passenger seat, ears perked, eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. Ben slid the burner phone onto the dashboard. One message glowed on the screen. "Come alone. No badge, none, awaken." He wasn't stupid. He kept both. But the message wasn't wrong. This wasn't about law anymore. It was personal, emotional, twisted. He looked at Echo. "You sure about this, partner?" Echo wagged his tail once, not playful, but firm. Affirmative. They walked the last 100 yards in silence. Moonlight spilled across the cracked walkway where Ellie used to ride her scooter. The smell of scorched wood still clung to the porch beams. Ben opened the old gate slowly, careful not to let it creak. Echo led the way through the burned remains of the living room, past the hollow chimney, through the empty kitchen, and there he was, Alejandro Ruiz, standing where the dining room table once sat, lit by a single work lamp plugged into a humming generator. His suit was dark, expensive, but tailored for movement. His hair was slicked back, his watch heavy, his smile sharper than any blade. He didn't look like a cartel thug. He looked like a CEO. Ben stopped 10 feet away. Echo growled low beside him. Alejandro didn't flinch. "Sheriff Whitaker," he said smoothly, "I was wondering when you'd catch up." Ben didn't answer. He studied the man's hands. No visible weapons. But the twitch in his left eye said he was expecting something to go sideways. "You've seen her," Alejandro continued. "Ellie." "Her name is Ellie Carver," Ben said. Alejandro chuckled. "Names are fluid. Identity is protection. She's safe. She's thriving. She doesn't remember who she is. She doesn't need to remember. She's happy." Ben took a slow step forward. "No, she's programmed. There's a difference." Alejandro's smile faded. "You're not here to negotiate, are you?" "No." "Then let me guess. You want to rescue her, drag her back to a life she doesn't remember, ruin everything we've built." Ben didn't blink. Echo growled again, louder this time. Alejandro looked down at the dog, then back at Ben. "You think he remembers too? Smells things others can't? That's the problem with survivors. They don't forget." Ben reached into his coat pocket and tossed something onto the scorched floorboards. The photo of Ellie from Valley Springs, dated, stamped. Alejandro picked it up. Didn't even flinch. "She's in school," Ben said. "She's got friends. She's building a life that doesn't belong to her. One you gave her so you could control her. She has safety, structure, purpose. Isn't that what every parent wants? You're not her father." Alejandro's jaw tightened. No, but I've been one longer than her real one ever was. That was the moment Echo lunged. Not a full attack, not teeth bared, just a lightning-fast charge that ended 2 feet short. A warning. Alejandro stepped back. For the first time, his mask cracked. "That's enough," he said coldly. Ben put a hand on Echo's back. "You've been laundering families like money, haven't you? Anyone who gets too close to exposing you, their loved ones go missing. Rebranded, repurposed. You hold them as leverage." Alejandro didn't answer. "You did it to the Carvers, the Matthews, probably half a dozen others we don't even know about." Still silence. Ben pressed. "But Roger figured it out, didn't he? He left messages, documents, insurance, and you've been searching for that evidence ever since." Alejandro smiled again, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You're clever, Sheriff, but you're not the only one. Do you really think I've survived this long without help?" Ben frowned. "What are you talking about?" Alejandro turned toward the back door. "Come on out." Footsteps. Heavy. Confident. Ben's stomach turned as the man stepped into the light. Deputy Paul Landry, Ben's oldest deputy, his fishing buddy, his godson's uncle. Landry gave a short nod, gun already drawn, safety off. "Ben," he said. "You're kidding me." "I didn't have a choice," Landry said. "You know what kind of grip this guy has. You've seen what happens to families that try to fight back." "You helped him," Ben whispered. "You helped erase Ellie Carver." "I helped keep her alive." Echo barked once, loud warning, and stepped between Ben and Landry. Alejandro raised a hand. "Let's not be dramatic. We're all men of reason. You came here to talk. Let's talk." Ben's voice dropped to a growl. "I came here for the truth." "You're not ready for the truth," Alejandro replied. "Because it's uglier than you want it to be." Back in the truck, Ben slammed the door and gripped the wheel like it might break. Echo sat in the back seat, watching him through the rearview mirror. "I trusted him," Ben whispered. "Landry, he held my daughter when she was born." He closed his eyes. "I'm done being polite." The next morning, Ben went to the local paper, the Cedar Falls Herald. His old friend, Connie Griggs, ran the newsroom. She owed him 2 favors and a whiskey. He dropped the folder on her desk. "What's this?" "Everything. Photos, USB files, names, dates, laundering schemes, family re-identification. I want it all published." Connie looked up. "You're declaring war. I'm already in it." That evening, a letter arrived at the motel. Handwritten. Ben opened it with a trembling hand. "You've crossed a line. If you keep pushing, we take her away, this time for good. You're not her family anymore. Let it go." There was no signature, just a photo tucked inside. It was Rachel Carver, aged, tired, eyes filled with quiet fear, and she was holding a sign with a date. Today. Echo whined behind him. Ben stared at the image, his stomach twisting. She was alive, and she was a prisoner in plain sight. Ben Whitaker hadn't been back to the treehouse since the day Echo found Roger Carver's letter, the one that cracked the case wide open. But now, with the photo of Rachel Carver fresh in his hands and Alejandro's threat echoing in his mind, he knew it was the only place left to look. The note had said, "Take one more step, and she disappears forever." But Ben had taken more than one, and now they were out of time. The sun was starting to dip behind the hills as he and Echo made their way through the overgrown backyard of the old Carver place. The tall grass scratched Ben's jeans. Echo moved low and cautious, head turning with every gust of wind. The treehouse stood like a forgotten watchtower. Gray wood, moss-covered roof, rope ladder fraying at the edges. It looked smaller than Ben remembered. Somehow, lonelier. But Echo didn't hesitate. He ran to the base and looked up, tail wagging once. "All right," Ben said, tugging on the rope. "Let's go back in time." The climb was slower than the last time. Every creak of the wood felt heavier, like the tree itself remembered what had been hidden here. Inside, nothing had changed. The same moldy books, The same cracked teacups from Ellie's imaginary tea parties. Mr. Pickles, the stuffed elephant, still sat in the corner, one button eye missing. But Echo didn't care about any of that. He went to the back left corner and started pawing at the floor. Ben knelt beside him. The floorboard there looked newer, just slightly. Same wood grain, but fewer scuffs. Echo sniffed, then barked once, sharp and sure. Ben pulled out his pocket knife and worked the edge between the boards. The plank popped loose. Beneath it was a metal lockbox, wrapped in plastic and duct tape, still sealed, still solid. Echo sat back, tail sweeping slowly behind him. "You good boy," Ben whispered. "You damn good boy." Back in the motel, Ben placed the lockbox on the table and sat across from it like it might explode. Echo watched from the bed, paws tucked, eyes wide. Ben peeled away the tape, opened the lid. Inside was a manila envelope, a second note, and a mini voice recorder. The envelope was labeled, "Carver, Level 5, Fed, Evidence." The note was short, written in Roger's familiar block letters. "If this lands in your hands, it means I'm gone. But my family isn't. The USB only scratched the surface. This is the core. Give it to someone who can protect them better than I could." Ben picked up the recorder and pressed play. Roger's voice filled the room. "They told me it was just cash, harmless. Just keep it moving through the construction books and no one gets hurt. But then they started asking for more. IDs, permits, ways to make people disappear. They took my wife and kids the day I said no. Told me they'd kill them if I ever spoke. But I recorded everything. The meetings, the deals, the names. Alejandro Ruiz isn't the top. He's the middle. The rot goes higher." Ben's hand tightened on the table. "They're living somewhere under new names now. Rachel, Ellie, Chloe. I don't know where. I was never told, but I was allowed to visit once. Supervised. Ellie didn't recognize me. Called someone else Papa. That broke me. But I smiled through it. Because she was alive. And that was more than I deserved." The recording clicked off. Ben looked at Echo. Neither of them moved for a long time. The next morning, Ben drove straight to FBI field office in Billings. He didn't trust them. Not after what he'd seen. But he had no choice. He asked for one person, Agent Rachel Brooks. She met him in a private conference room, wearing a bulletproof vest under her blazer and dark circles under her eyes. "I need you to listen," Ben said, placing the recorder and files on the table. "And I need you to tell me who's still clean inside your agency." She scanned the labels, pressed play, and listened to Roger's voice. When the recording ended, she just stared at the wall. "My God," she whispered. He was building a federal-level whistleblower case. Ben nodded, and he never got the chance. Brooks turned back toward him, eyes wide. "Do you realize what you have? This is enough to issue warrants, freeze assets, open full-scale investigations." "I don't care about investigations," Ben said. "I care about Rachel Carver and Ellie and Chloe. You need to get them out. Now." Brooks nodded slowly. "I'll make the call." That night, Echo wouldn't rest. He paced the motel room in circles, growling low every time headlights passed the window. At 2:11 a.m. someone knocked on the door. Ben reached for his gun. He opened the door a crack, just enough to see Rachel Carver, eyes puffy, hands trembling. Ben dropped the gun. "Rachel?" She nodded. "They let me go. Said I wasn't useful anymore. I think Alejandro knows you found the files." Ben stepped aside. She entered like a ghost. Echo ran to her, sniffed, then gently pressed his head against her hip. She froze, then dropped to her knees and hugged him. "Echo," she whispered, sobbing into his fur. "You found him again. You found us." They sat together for hours. Ben made coffee. Rachel told him where they'd been kept. 2 safe houses over the last decade. Always guarded. Always isolated. Ellie, or Maria, as she still called herself, had been conditioned to believe Alejandro was her father. The girls had been told Ben was the reason their real father died. Ben swallowed hard. "She hates me, doesn't she?" Rachel wiped her eyes. "She doesn't remember you. That's worse." The next morning, Ben drove Rachel to a secure FBI location. Echo rode in the back with her, head in her lap. Agent Brooks met them with 4 agents and a surveillance van. "Chloe's already with us," she said. "We got her out 2 days ago." "And Ellie?" Brooks hesitated. "She's resisting." "What do you mean?" "She wants to go back to Ruiz. Says we kidnapped her. Says we're the criminals." Rachel's hand went to her mouth. "She doesn't know," she whispered. "She doesn't know who we are." Ben stepped forward. "Let me see her." They brought him into a small room, plain walls, 2 chairs, 1 table. Across from him sat a teenage girl. Hair in a ponytail, hoodie, arms crossed. When she looked up, there was no recognition. "You're the sheriff," she said flatly. "I'm your brother," Ben whispered. "No," she snapped. "My brother left us. My papa saved us." She stood. "I want to go home." Ben didn't argue. He placed a single item on the table. Mr. Pickles, the stuffed elephant. Ellie froze. Tears filled her eyes, unblinking, as she reached forward and touched the frayed fabric. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "I used to carry it for you when you fell asleep on the couch." She stared at the toy, then at him, her mouth slowly opening, and then Echo stepped forward. He sat at her feet. She looked down, and smiled. "Echo," she said, "is that you?" Ben's voice cracked. "He never stopped looking for you." "Neither did I." The courtroom was colder than expected. Ben Whitaker sat 2 rows behind the prosecution's table, flanked by U.S. Marshals and field agents. To his left, Rachel Carver kept her head down, clutching a tissue in one hand and Echo's leash in the other. The German shepherd rested calmly at her feet, eyes never leaving the stand where Ellie, now finally acknowledging her name again, was about to testify. It had taken 3 weeks of therapy, family photos, and Echo's unwavering presence to get her there. The first time she looked Ben in the eye and called him Ben instead of sheriff, he cried. The second time, she called him brother. He damn near collapsed. Now she was 16, in a federal courtroom about to speak the truth in front of the very system that had failed to protect her. Assistant U.S. Attorney Deborah Linwood approached the witness stand. "Miss Carver," she said gently, "do you know why you're here today?" Ellie nodded slowly. "To tell the truth." "And what truth is that?" Ellie looked across the room, her voice steady but quiet. "That Alejandro Ruiz wasn't my father. That he made me believe he saved us. That he told us lies about who we were and who we weren't." "And who are you?" She took a deep breath. "My name is Ellie Carver. I'm the daughter of Roger and Rachel Carver. I have a sister, Chloe, and a brother, Ben. I used to love soccer. I still love elephants. And I've been missing for 10 years. The room fell still. Ben felt Rachel's hand grip his tightly. Echo sat up straighter. They all knew this testimony was a turning point. The defense attorneys did their best to shake her. They asked her if she was confused, if maybe she was pressured by law enforcement, if she felt persuaded to call herself Ellie again. She answered every question with grace, but the edge in her voice returned when they mentioned Alejandro. "Don't call him my father," she snapped. "He was my kidnapper. He taught me to be afraid of my own family. He punished us when we asked questions." The judge reminded the court to remain civil, but Ellie didn't back down. When asked why she believed her real family now, she looked straight at Echo in the gallery. "Because my dog never forgot me," she said. "Because the only thing in my life that didn't change was him." By the end of the trial, 27 people had been indicted. Alejandro Ruiz, caught trying to flee the country, had his bail denied. 3 federal judges were removed from the bench. 2 high-ranking agents within Homeland Security were arrested for obstruction and conspiracy. Roger Carver's tapes had done their part, but Echo's nose, his loyalty, had done what no one else could. Found the living before they became another cold case. 6 months later, Cedar Falls was blooming again. The town had forgiven itself, slowly. The Carver house had been bought by a new family, with kids and a dog of their own. The burned-out memories had finally been cleared away. Ben sat on his porch with Echo lying beside him, soaking up the spring sun. Ellie sat on the steps, sketching in a notebook. Something about elephants and badges and tree houses. Chloe had started working with a nonprofit that helped families recover from psychological abuse. Rachel went back to teaching music at the elementary school. They weren't normal, but they were healing. That evening, Echo perked up at the sound of tires in the gravel. An unmarked sedan rolled into Ben's driveway. From it stepped Agent Rachel Brooks, the only FBI agent Ben still trusted. She held a thick manila envelope. "This came in from D.C.," she said. "Official commendation. For you." Ben chuckled. "They still give those out?" "To you, yes." She handed him the envelope, but then her voice dropped. "There's more." Ben frowned. "More?" Brooks nodded. "Another family just outside Boise. Same signs. Disappearance. Re-identity. Financial trail looks eerily familiar." She looked down at Echo. "We're assembling a task force, but we could use some backup." Ben looked at Echo. Echo sat up, ears high, tail still, waiting. Then Ben smiled. "He's already packed." 1 week later, Ben and Echo stood outside a new house in a new town. Another family was missing. Another silence needed to be broken. Echo's nose twitched. He barked once. A new story was about to begin. Thank you for following Echo's journey. This story was inspired by the quiet loyalty and instinctive love that dogs show us every day. They don't just guard our homes, they guard our hearts. Echo didn't just solve a mystery. He gave a family their future back. What would your dog do to protect the people they love? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Heroes for Animals for more real, emotional, and powerful stories where animals make the difference.